So, delegating your AGP upgrade is one of many things that can now be handled for you using a powerful combination Gemini and Android Studio with one of our own Android skills. And we have a lot more of those to share with you. But first, we have to understand what exactly are skills, how do they work, and how does Studio leverage this new capability? Let's use one as an example. Skills are the open standard markdown files, skills.md, that represent modular instruction sets for AI agents and tools. They provide technical specifications for a task, grounding the LLMs with up-to-date and domain-specific information. They enable execution of specialized workflows and expertise through added knowledge and context. So how do you use them in your day-to-day work? Generally, you fetch skills from a trusted source, and you place them into a dedicated repository, like a local project root or user home. Using Android Studio as an example, skills can go to a workspace-specific or a global directory. After that, agents are aware of all of the present skills by keeping a list of the skills metadata and sending it to the LLM on every prompt. When the user sends a prompt, or you, the LLM tries to match the skills metadata and the description with an executed task, and then find and activates the most suitable skills. Skills that are designed to trigger automatically, so there's no need for you to manually manually search and attach them and force their usage, but you can, of course, if you want to. So now that we kind of understand the basics, how do we make the most out of this concept for Android development? You heard about it in the developer productivity keynote, but to better support you and your Android development with AI, we launched the official Android Skills, a dedicated repository of AI-optimized instructions to help models better understand and execute specific patterns that follow our best practices and guidance on Android development. To install skills easily and update them regularly, we recommend using Android CLI, so check out its documentation for more. You can also check out the GitHub repo for the latest updates. With Android Skills, we kind of wanted to tackle a few challenges we realized happen when working with LLMs. LLMs often lack context on the newest Android frameworks and changes due to their training cutoff date. If you ask it to migrate a legacy navigation, they often won't know anything about the latest frameworks. Skills allow us to deliver these changes and updates to AI tools instantly. Similarly, you might ask LLMs to analyze a project setup, and it can often provide a result that's unstructured and not always really fully helpful. Android Skills guide LLMs in executing the more complex but really important workflows while also following our best practices. Traditional documentation can be descriptive, conceptual, and high level. And while that's perfect for our learning, it can be less performant with LLMs that require precise and actionable instructions. Standard documentation teaches humans how to think and the whys, while skills tell AI how to execute something, what and how to do it. Knowing all that, our focus is on publishing Android Skills, where our testing showed that the LLMs need more grounding and steering. So in workflows such as AGP9 and XML to Compose migrations, adding navigation 3 to your project, migrating from nav to analysis of your R8 config, enabling edge-to-edge support, and a lot more. So Android Skills can be roughly split into procedural and specialized workflows. So something that demonstrates a step-by-step custom process to complete a specific task, like the R8 config analysis. They can also be referenced and knowledge-based, so serving as a collection of resources or pointers to other supporting files, grounding the LLMs with more knowledge and expertise, like how the edge-to-edge skill teaches the LLM how to implement support for it. And they can be hybrid, so integrating both procedural and knowledge-based elements. The XML to Compose migration skill does exactly that. Android Skills are supported by Android Studio and Android CLI, but are also designed to be reusable across any AI tool or agent of your choice that have support for skills. So Google Antigravity, AI Studio, or any other. For Android Studio, a selected subset of Android Skills are directly preloaded within by enabling them in settings. These are available at agent startup and get activated automatically, so no need for you to manually download or activate them. You can, of course, add more skills manually by checking out from our repository or Android CLI and placing them in the dedicated directories for Studio. You can check out the documentation for full information. Android CLI also offers full integration with Android skills. You can install them to your dedicated directories for specific agents. You can also specify which skills you want. You can remove them, list them, find them, and so on. You can even tweak or write your own. But if you're going to write your own, let me share a few tips that we have from our own experience of writing Android skills. Don't insist on skills for user journeys that the LLM is already pretty good at. Skills are meant to supplement the default knowledge of an LLM. So forcing skills for tasks it already knows, it adds unnecessary overhead. So rely on testing thoroughly to figure out which scenarios require skills. Don't use LLMs to generate skills from scratch without providing any additional sources or knowledge. If an LLM already knows a topic and can generate a skill for it using its default knowledge, it doesn't need a skill. Think about what to add to agents.md and what to add to skill.md. The entire content of an agent.md is sent as context for every user prompt, while skills are activated on demand, so only when they're needed. Good skill candidates are usually brand new APIs or version behavior changes, so information that is so recent that the LLMs know very little about it. So things like custom domain and specific workflows are also good candidates, large procedural migrations, etc. Less is more. Find the minimum scope and the length of a skill that provides the maximum benefits. Generally, succinct skills perform better than the very, very lengthy ones, because LLMs start forgetting if you throw too much context their way. And finally, always use skills from trusted sources and validate them before running, so sources like Android CLI. Let's look at one particularly handy Android skill for a larger task. So if we're talking about opportunities to modernize an app, the first thing that comes to mind is migrating from XML to Compose. As you might have already heard in What's New in Android, we are now Compose first. This means that we're now advising you to write new code and features in Compose, as well as migrate old XML views, because views are moving into maintenance mode. Basically, we recommend you write all of your Android UI in Jetpack Compose across all form factors. To support you in this, we've published an XML to Compose migration skill to better guide any agents and tools of your choice in this migration effort. So now we're going to see one of these skills in action. Okay, we can cut to the demo. So here we have one of our older samples called Sunflower that's written entirely in views. So before we do anything, what I'm going to start is actually kick off the migration first because it takes a while. And I'm going to say migrate a layout from XML to Compose. I'm going to let it run in the background, and then we're going to come back to it at the very end. So as we see, we have Sunflower here all in views, and we're going to use our skill to migrate it to Compose. So when we first started testing the migration with LLMs from XML to Compose, we realized that the LLMs were already pretty good at doing the basics, so like mapping the basic layouts from XML to Compose, or doing recycler view to lazy mapping, etc. So those those basics that you kind of encounter in every migration. But what it was struggling with was defining a very specific workflow that is consistent throughout many runs. And that is exactly what we decided to focus on with our skill. So we provide a recommended workflow that is divided into substeps that we think apply across all code bases. And we also define criteria for things like success or validation or analysis of your code base. And we also ground it with supporting files which follow our best practices and the latest, for example, Compose versioning and changes that come from these new APIs. So aside from that, some of the most important things to notice in this skill are the open standards specifications or requirements that are needed to make this a skill. At the very top, we see this YAML metadata that is always found on top that contains two most important fields, which are the name and the description. It also needs the main skill file needs to be named skill.md in uppercase. And aside from that, the only other requirement, well, it is kind of a requirement, is to have at least some content in the body of the skill. Everything else is optional. You can write whatever is needed for the skill to succeed or the agent to do a good task with it. But most commonly in skills, you might find things like objectives or goals defined at the very top, constraints or restrictions or requirements for executing the skill, summaries or step-by-step processes and subtasks, things like code snippets, supporting files, do's and don'ts, and all of these. Those are the most common ones. Okay, let me just check the agent to see if it's running still. Okay. That was a spoiler. Okay, cool. So now that we kind of went over the focus of our skill, I also want to say that breaking down any larger tasks, so things like big migrations or big refactors, breaking them down into smaller subtasks generally provides much better results with LLMs because they're able to follow a much more methodical way that is consistent across many runs. In that case, using that as our guidance, we realized that there are some steps that are applicable for more code bases. So things like identifying how to identify the optimal XML layout for as a candidate, things like how to create a plan properly or capture the initial XML view, setting up Compose and its theming, and many other steps that you can see from here. So this workflow is kind of sturdy enough and generalized enough so that it works with a variety of code bases. But with this skill, as with any other, it's always a good practice for you to customize it and tweak into your own production code base. So add pointers or details for the LLMs that are unique to your own code pattern. So for example, if we wanted to tweak this, we could say used only layouts from feature module X and constrain it to just a specific module. We can say that we don't actually want the set of Compose because we've already done it. Or we can say that for migrating theming, we can provide our own references. So references like design, system, markdown. So something that comes from our own internal documentation that helps us point the LLMs in the right way. An important note, though, here is if you do decide to tweak an existing skill that you pulled from a source, do make sure that you always remember to kind of extract it somewhere else, rename it, put it in a different location. Just make it different from the original source of truth, because if you do a bulk update of your skills, your custom tweaks might get actually overwritten. Okay, so that's kind of, you get the idea about this. You can see that we have this main skill.md here, and it provides all of the summaries for individual subtasks. But you can also see that our skill directory contains a lot more additional supporting files. And these are any files that supplement the original skill.md with additional context, additional knowledge, other supplemental markdowns, scripts, assets, so anything that the model needs to perform this task more successfully. So one important note to say about this is, as you can see, we provide a lot of supporting files from our main skill MD, but we're always very explicit about when and how the LLM should use these files. The reason for that is because we want to ensure that the LLM is actually able to activate these supporting files on demand as well. So not load them all at the very start, but use them only for specific tasks. And not only that, but it's able to actually also skip specific steps when it realizes it doesn't need to perform them. So in that case, for example, the LLM would actually skip this step of setting up Compose dependencies and activation of this file because it realized it's already been set up. So let's look at one of these in more detail. So for example, we have the identify optimal XML candidate. So you can see that this subtask was extracted in a supporting file because we wanted the LLM to skip it if the user actually provides and points us to the layout that they want migrated. Aside from that, it also means that we've shortened the main skill MD length and optimized for better context usage overall. You'll notice that the language in this supporting file but also across any other skills that we have, is very concise, it's very procedural, it avoids usages of vague and subjective words, or if we do decide to use a subjective word, which is the word optimal, we always ensure to provide the exact criteria on what makes this subjective word more measurable for the LLM. Okay, I think that's kind of all of the basics that I wanted to cover for the skill. I think the most important part now that's left is for you to check it out, try it out, provide feedback to us, and see how well it performs. And with that in mind, I'm going to jump into the actual results. So I can see here that the skill MD got activated immediately, and it went into the activation of the supporting file for it as well, once it realized that that's the first step it requires. There's a lot more information here, but I want to see the results. Okay, so it decided to activate fragment plant detail, and it migrated it into a plant screen composable. Okay, let's get these two a quick comparison. And let's see how they look. Okay, so it's done a pretty good job overall. There are some tweaks here and there that can be modified manually, but I'm pretty happy with this as it looks like now, because it's meant to do exactly what it's done, which is to provide the scaffolding for you, take over the more repetitive parts of Android development, and let you take over the more fun ones and build on top of it. So this way, hopefully, layout by layout, it gets you closer to Compose first. And you can check out this skill as many other more that we have through Android CLI. It's integrated in Studio as well, so you can try it out already. And let us know what you think.